Hi, all right. Thanks for checking out this video. I'm Chris Searles. I am the guy doing the rainmaking with trees and strategic watering projects. And this video is a quick walkthrough, as quick as I can make it, of the paper that I recently put together, or the report, I should say, on the strategic watering I did to help halt the Garnet Fire in September of 2025. There are two shorter videos preceding this one. The second one is the one maybe everyone should watch. It's about 10 minutes and it's just the numbers. And this is the report I made on the Garnet Fire strategic watering experience. It's called Something Good Happened. Did strategic watering help halt the Garnet Fire of 2025? A report on efforts and outcomes to do just that. By me, Chris Searles, November 2025. And on the cover, there's the picture of the location, or mapping rather, the sort of mapping of the moisture flow through the air that I'm counting on to help bring an early into that fire. The very simple equipment I use, and then myself. This is a simple summary of the Garnet Fire plus my strategic watering. We'll come back to this in a minute. You see the dates on the left, the major events that took place during those dates in the middle, and then my strategic watering sessions on the right. And then we get into the paper. This is, I guess, page 2. Something good happened. Some apparent and potential impacts of strategic watering on the Garnet Fire 2025 and implications for future defense against drought and wildfire. There are 5 chapters in this report, but we're only going to actually read 4 of them. Overview, thesis and actions, evidence of unusual changes, and takeaways. I'm going to scroll through though first and just show you kind of the overview of the paper itself. And so we'll hit on a couple of high points on the synopsis. This overview has, I think, 4 or 5 paragraphs about me, the strategic watering, the Garnet Fire, how long I worked on it and what happened, and then how this keeps happening in these different projects I've been doing for years. Thesis and Actions talks about the main ideas I was working from and the primary science I work from, sort of reiterates what I was just telling you about the cover images and gets into a little more detail on how I took actions to execute the plan of strategic watering on the landscape I worked on that was upwind of the Garnet Fire. Chapter 3, Evidence of Unusual Changes. This is getting into a little bit of qualitative stuff as well as the big breakthrough of moisture of extinction, which we'll explain in a moment. The graph here of unusual changes is really just the numbers story of the Garnet Fire, but there's a separate video for this, and it's called The Numbers. It's about 10 minutes long. I really recommend watching that because it makes the case without any of my qualitative stuff in there. Also here in evidence, we have 3 key snapshots. We're going to come back to that. More evidence resources, the synopsis piece that we're skipping, we will go through briefly when we get there, but as you can see, this is actually the longest section. It's 8 pages of bullet points with the key image for each day showing the progression of the weather moving out of fire conditions into moist air conditions and then the end of the fire. Also ChatGPT's comments in big picture on the work that I did. Finally here is the final page, takeaways. And so it's just a page of thoughts. You'll notice here in the table of contents, each chapter is really only 2 pages long, except for the final chapter that's 1 page long and the synopsis bullet points that we're not going to read through. Okay, so here we go. This is Something Good Happened. Did strategic watering help halt the Garnet Fire of 2025? Chapter 1, Overview. I'm Chris Searles, designer, manager, practitioner of this effort to help halt the Garnet Fire of 2025 with strategic watering. Strategic watering is a forest rehydration protocol I developed from the science on forest moisture circulation. My nonprofit, Biointegrity Partnerships, aka Biointegrity, has several protocols for drought rescue based in this science. I am not a trained scientist. I am a self-taught ecologist from these studies. I know it sounds audacious, the idea that a few thousand gallons of water carefully distributed onto best candidate trees for air-based moisture circulation could knock out or help knock out a raging forest fire 20 miles downwind, even to me. But this was my 13th strategic watering project. In each of the prior projects, a fundamental takeaway has been that local to regional humidity goes up quickly and pervasively. This effort was another test of the strategic watering techniques that have worked so well for me on all prior efforts across 5 states in the United States West. I was and am confident any person or team can replicate what I'm doing to rapidly increase moist air circulation if they choose to use the same careful techniques. This report shares credible information and my perspectives so the reader can make their own choice about what happened. Paragraph 2. Strategic watering. The simplest solution is often the correct one. In strategic watering, the water relocates upwind of a critically dry forested region and trickle rehydrates the largest trees there to stimulate moist circulation at landscape scale. I have worked successfully with this principle to eliminate wildfire threats in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, and Oregon since 2022. Please check out my nonprofit, biointegrity.net, for more information. Biointegrity's mission and goal are to help the world's most effective environmental solutions succeed by doing what's best for our planetary life support system, for the good of the biosphere. Science shows us that the most productive ecosystems on Earth are large, well-hydrated wild forests, and that for the last several 100 million years, hydrated forests have been the primary engine for moisture circulation on and over land. Period. Full stop. Hydrated forests are immensely powerful and immensely fundamental to all life processes. Hydrated forests don't catch on fire either. They self-circulate moist air. Strategic watering simply rehydrates that self-care. We are jump-starting moisture sharing that's already ready to go. The vegetation does more than 99% of the work. The strategic waterer works with forest shape, meaning the shape of the infrastructure itself, forest scale, meaning the size of this infrastructure and the trees inside of it, forest quality, meaning the degree of that forest's wildness, moistness, maturity, and integration, and forest winds, meaning the direction and intensity of the winds that affect that forest, to determine location, and then gets to slow watering via a few key techniques I've developed. You can learn more about these techniques on the Biointegrity website. The Garnet Fire ignited August 24, 2025, due to a lightning strike. It advanced from existential danger to existential emergency on Sunday, September 7th, when it consumed 12,658 acres that single day. This meant the fire had burned a total of more than 49,000 acres in its first 15 days. It was a catastrophe. Army helicopters, night vision helicopters, and air tankers were brought in the next day, September 8. About 1,200 people were added to the firefighting team throughout that week. This was an immediate threat to communities such as Dinky Creek, Shaver Lake, and Albury, and thousands of acres of the Sierra National Forest, including 200 2,000-year-old grand giant sequoia trees in the world-famous McKinley Grove. It took 4 days to halt it, 9 days to put it out. I came to the Garnet Fire straight from working in Prescott, Arizona, where I had just finished the Southwest Project's 2025. When I arrived at the top of Radio Lane outside of Albury, California on September 6, I was exhausted. The last 90 minutes of my drive had been truly terrifying. It was clear the region was flammable and full of dry fuels, meaning grasses and downed limbs and splitting trees. And a tree on the highway outside of Fresno was on fire. The orchards I drove through on my way up the mountain looked like we were on Mars. Driving up and into the mountains through the hairpin turns and seeing desiccated life everywhere made me question how long I was going to stay. I didn't know how fast the Garnet Fire could move, or if closer fires might also ignite before we got moist air circulation going. It usually takes at least 2 days. But thanks to my host Muriel, I was able to start the very next day, Sunday, September 7, and by Thursday, September 11th, there was, quote, no fire outside the current footprint of the Garnet Fire. A complete turnaround. This was stated by the NC Web Fire reports on that day. The raging fire stopped pushing forward just 4 days after it exploded. I think it's obvious my timing was lucky. Humidity was due to increase Monday night, but importantly, it was not due to increase at proportions that could halt a fire in 4 days. 9 days after I got started watering, the fire's total growth officially ceased. And all of this without a drop of rain. And so now we take a quick look again at the simple summary, Garnet Fire plus my strategic watering. And just going across the line here, we have on August 24 through September 6, the first 13 days of wildfire. They were pretty significant. I think the average is around 2,100 acres a day or something like that. And then that Sunday, September 7th, is the major emergency day that over 12,600 acres burn. And it's also the day I start strategic watering. It's day 1 of strategic watering. Then on Monday, September 8th, the emergency appears to calm. I note this early in the morning, and you can see in the footage I've posted on YouTube that, I think we're going to win this thing. And lo and behold, the fire burned less than 6,000 acres. Tuesday, September 9th, I call the pivotal day because I could just tell things were starting to go our way. We started to get really good clouds that day. We'll scan over that in a second. And just a ton of good things happened. Wednesday, September 10th, everything flipped. You could feel it on the landscape. The air and the vegetation and the soil went from being hard and dry to being soft and moist. Thursday, September 11th, I said, midway through the day, we got it. And that night, they reported no internal fire growth for the entire day of September 11. So the fire essentially stopped growing on that day, about 4 days after I got started watering. Friday, September 12th, I kept watering. The fire weather died. That'll be verified later in the report. Saturday, September 13th, I did some watering and left about halfway through the day. I called this my insurance watering. I was also trying to help bring rain on the following week, Thursday. And then Sunday the 14th, the fire report said that the Garnet Fire stayed in its footprint. And Monday the 15th, they said no growth and the acreage losses were done. So I began watering on Sunday the 7th and the fire stopped growing for official counts on Monday, September 15th, maybe even as early as Thursday, September 11th. Something good keeps happening. So far, as I've mentioned, this moisture air over the landscape outcome appears to be reliable, and that's the breakthrough. I consider moister, cooler air to be a guaranteed outcome of strategic watering 100% of the time at present. That could change. But let me also say, if I sound braggy in the way I talk about this stuff, it's because I'm confident in the trees and the forests. They move and share moisture through the air better than any other known resource. Out of 13 strategic watering projects, this is my 13th success. The course of events during the Garnet Fire effort mirrors my Central Texas Project's 2023 work 2 years ago, where I first confirmed it is possible to increase landscape moisture circulation to the point where red flag warnings disappear over dozens to hundreds of miles downwind of your watered forest without rain. My North California Project's 2022 is where I first observed this large-scale moisture sharing effect over the landscape. My Northwest Project's 2024 effort was designed to put out multiple fires in Oregon, and it did, using these strategic watering techniques. And again, anyone can do this. Please send me your questions. Before we move on, let's take a quick look to marvel at the McKinley Grove here. This photo by redwoodhikes.com. And then we get into chapter 2, Thesis and Actions. It kind of begins with the rhetorical thing. It's like humanity just needs to learn this one thing. Trees are the moisture circulators over land. Numerous scientific studies, seminally to me, Wright, Makarieva, Ellison, Keyes, Lawrence, and Yaseshko. These are different studies that et al. Include a bunch of other people as well, but these studies cumulatively explain how trees, forests, and leaf stomata attract, circulate, amplify, and generate fresh water in the air, and thereby influence the atmosphere at various scales and in variously moistening ways. In short, the research establishes that landscape vegetation gets wetter once large, dry trees are hydrated upwind. Think of that as a biophysical law on Earth. My thesis, therefore, is that by hydrating large, dry trees in wild forests upwind of the Garnet Fire, I should be able to trigger aerial moisture movements large enough to help dampen or extinguish the fire. It should take 5 to 7 days. I thought we could get rain too before I got there and realized rain was at least a week away. No matter what, humidity would go up and hopefully validate my thesis. We'd see how things developed from there. So here again is the location of the watering, the moisture distribution pattern I mentioned that I'm counting on. Essentially, the moisture should move downwind across the forest landscape. We're going to come back to these smaller graphics here. This is the site with its various zones. We don't really need to come back to the equipment. That's fairly self-explanatory. And then this is the site zone, sort of movement and kind of also an allusion to circulation. Let's keep reading. Actions taken. Strategic watering is simple. Locate upwind of the droughted location and carry out my rainmaking with trees project protocols. I located 100% of my waterings on Radio Lane near the top of Meadow Lake's Radio Tower Mountain, next to the tower, east-southeast of Albury, California. I worked multiple tree groves on that site, zones on the maps here. I slow rehydrated each large tree in each zone, administering an average of about 1,000 gallons of water per day amongst all the trees in 2 distinct zones per day, using 38 trickle buckets. Since I had water pressure, I used a spray nozzle to do canopy stimulations and air, soil, and trunk saturations wherever possible. And we will get into that another day, what that means. My aforementioned generous host donated the water, the trees, and the land, her acreage, once she heard about what I was trying to do. It was an ideal location and partnership, and this all just came together through Airbnb, by the way. Muriel's property is rich with large conifer and deciduous trees and wild vegetation. She's adjacent to the Sierra National Forest. Her property is large enough to serve as 2 sites, so they can become self-circulating. And the location is perfectly situated northwest of the fire and downwind of 7 contiguous national forests in California on the east side of the valley. So pretty much checked all the boxes of what I'm looking for. I worked my way around the property in a counterclockwise direction, more or less, maintaining the house as the focal point. The image you're seeing here details my sequencing. I doubled back on some of the Zone 1 waterings after day 1 because the whole place was so dry and unreceptive on that first day that it was kind of like watering concrete at times. Chapter 3. Evidence of unusual changes. And we start here with qualitative stuff, but then we're going to get into the numbers graph a little bit in a moment. Nothing good was happening when I arrived. I started watering and things started to change. Progress out of extreme wildfire conditions was rapid, unforecast, and in sync with my daily watering progress. Everyone expected the worst on Monday, but we had the best by Friday. Either that's an extreme coincidence or these techniques worked again. Moisture of extinction, the point at which vegetation becomes so moist it will not burn. The most meaningful anomaly and the breaking point of this fire was the unexpected arrival of moisture of extinction on Monday night. Moisture of extinction is the point at which vegetation cannot burn and will not carry fire over a landscape. An increase in humidity was expected with Monday's cold front, but not to the extent we saw that week. Garnet's first moisture of extinction event came just 24 hours after its worst day of fire. I had also just finished watering day number 2. I see such immediate changes on every project. I kept working, and the moistened air that developed for the rest of the week reached up to 88% humidity over the fire Thursday and Friday nights, and 85% Saturday and Sunday nights. So this is achieving moisture of extinction to the max. The fire team's forecasts just 2 days prior to that were up to 63% for Thursday and Friday, and up to 58% for Saturday and Sunday. And so what I'm saying here is that I think my strategic waterings exponentially amplified the humidity addition trends that began with that cold front on Monday. Because the fire team actually didn't just underpredict it on Tuesday before it went up on Thursday night. And this is where these snapshots come in. They really underpredicted it. This is the Tuesday snapshot. They really unpredicted it on Thursday morning before it went up Thursday night. And so Thursday morning, the incident meteorologist said that the maximum humidities for Thursday night through Sunday night would be 70, 65, 62, and 58. And again, the fire instead reached 88, 88, 85, and 85. So it's way under. And of course, that's not a critique. That's to emphasize this idea that strategic watering had a big influence over the addition of moisture into the air that helped put out the fire. On Tuesday, day 3 of my waterings, this is September 9, the firefighting went from very challenging to very favorable, according to fire behavior analyst Kevin Montoya. And then on Friday, day 6, Mother Nature gave us a break, according to Operations Sections Chief Don Fraguglia. The fire was suddenly over, and containment more than tripled that next day. So this is Don Fraguglia on Saturday morning, the 13th, saying that on Friday, the 12th, Mother Nature gave them a break, the weather gave them a break, and they took full advantage, and just things really started going well. They basically didn't have to contend with active fire in a combative way anymore. So the fire was suddenly over. And the unusual changes, I think, are best tracked and proved by this graph down here, my history of the Garnet Fire, but the information in this graph, which you can explore on Google. It's a big old giant spreadsheet, and you can scroll up and down and all around. But that spreadsheet is sort of synopsized in this snapshot here. The graph utilizes the InstaWeb published Garnet Fire reports. These are the official federal government reports. The team's excellent public meetings on Facebook and YouTube, which I really, really appreciated. My notes and my video records, my snapshots and so forth. The Apple Weather app utilizes all of that stuff to show timing and sequence of changes at the fire. And then in the graph that is on, again, Google, the blue sections are highlighted to emphasize watering days. The light green stuff or dark green stuff is there to emphasize forest-connected breakthroughs. And then the light red is there to emphasize stuff that is relating to fire and negatives in this case. The bullet point synopsis I've mentioned before here that's 8 pages long actually shares more nuance and sort of important detail as to how these events unfolded on the ground. I may make a separate video on that. In any of these engagements through the Google graph spreadsheet thing, through the snapshots, even through all these evidence resources, you can see them on Project Archives, key images, curated videos, InstaWeb reports, YouTube channel, Facebook channel for the team. You'll see the same story over and over again, that it was a sudden surprise. And so the synopsis, we'll just look at the photos real quick. This is August 24th when the fire began. This is an image of it. And then the bullet point synopsis here skips to the first day of my watering. This was the conditions that day, the worst day of the fire. Then Monday, the worst air quality we had seen yet since I arrived, is snapshotted there. Then Tuesday, this pivotal day, I wake up and we have these amazing clouds, and the whole day you can just feel the air again is transitioning to moist in the vegetation. And this is when the fire behavior analyst says we're transitioning from very challenging to very favorable. Wednesday the 10th, everything flips for the better. You can see these dark, dramatic clouds over the landscape where I'm watering. We spend the whole day cloudy. Another thing that you'll notice if you explore the graph is that there's full sun in the forecast literally every day. This is maybe the shortest day of it. And once we get going here on the 9th and 10th, there's just clouds all day. So these bullet points detail that stuff. On Thursday, September 11th, I say we got it. I can just tell from the landscape before I hear it from the fire guys that there's something different about what's happening. And you can see really moist clouds there over our landscape. They end up saying there's no fire outside the current footprint that day. That's the breakthrough day. It's the first night we achieved this 88% relative humidity as the high over the fire. It ranged from 60 to 88%. The next day, they can't get their flamethrowers to burn vegetation in the perimeter until the afternoon. They have to wait till it's been sunny for a few hours before the vegetation's dry enough to burn. There's still no rain. Mother Nature's given us a huge break. The second consecutive night, that humidity goes 60 to 88%, is super high. So this fire is just gone, is my guess. I water on Saturday morning to get insurance and to try and help bring rain next Thursday because I had a sense from the forecasting that that was possible, and that did happen incredibly. The containment is just, basically triples in 2 days, going from 23% Friday morning to 69% Saturday night. And my watering ends then. The next day, they say the fire stayed within its footprint. They actually reversed the acreage loss total. And then on Monday, the 15th, 8 days after I started watering, the 23rd day of the fire, it's the final day of active acreage loss. And they say no growth within the fire. So I'll just say one last thing. The acreage that have been lost since around September 11th, they say somewhere in this time that we're talking about containment acres. We're not talking about, I may have that wrong, but that we're not talking about additional fire acres. The fire is kind of under control, and they're doing preventative stuff to make sure that flash fire doesn't take back over like it did on Sunday, the 7th. Okay, this is ChatGPT's synopsis, as I have written here. Make of it what you will. I fed it a bunch of information about the project on Saturday morning after I knew we had won, and I couldn't get verification from the reports yet. And came back and said you overrode the background conditions. The cloud development proved that you had a major influence on the localized atmospheric moistening, and the shift in microclimate to macroclimate and so forth. All right, here we are at the end. Takeaways. Chapter 5. We can eliminate wildfire risk. This was an easy win, mainly because my host Muriel made access to well-situated trees and water effortless. So I was able to get there and get going immediately. Thank you, Muriel. As mentioned, this is my 13th apparent regional success trying to prevent wildfire since 2022, and the second in California. From my perspective, it's clear human beings can scale up strategic watering and rehydration of landscapes to win on fire threat elimination, drought intervention, extreme weather avoidance, and more at minimal cost. The return on investment is exceptional. We do this by rehydrating forest flows. My ultimate goals with the Garnet Fire watering effort were not just to help put it out ahead of schedule, but to help bring an early end to fire season in California. Believe it or not, that happened. 5 days after I left Muriel's property, rain crept over the Garnet Fire area. Around the same time, northern to central California was receiving moist air from southwestern Oregon, where I worked in 2024. And by September 23rd at the latest, 2025, California was actually clear of wildfire statewide. It might have been days or even more than a week before that. This is 1 to 3 months earlier than in any recent year. So regardless of what you think about what I did, let's try and repeat these good outcomes in 2026 around the world. Hydrated trees potential. increased moist circulation, rapid elimination of wildfire conditions, rapid quality of life enhancement, rapid property value protection, enduring security and serenity enhancement, rapid agricultural productivity enhancement, timber and wilderness quality recovery, rapid biodiversity and wildlife recovery, enduring extreme weather avoidance, greening, beautification, and light quality enhancement, local climate optimization, meaning your local weather, humidity, airflow, moisture flow, and temperature all optimize, fog and lightweight precipitation generation, and rain attraction and catalyzation. For the good of the biosphere, test me, hire me, use this content. Please spread the word and water your trees. Let's do more. I invite all serious inquiries. Let's rehydrate the world for the good of the biosphere, 5 gallons at a time.